A woman uncovers a dusty, long-forgotten album in an old mansion, where the portraits inside all feature subjects with their eyes closed, as if in a permanent slumber. She has no idea that this is post-mortem photography, a practice that was once highly popular during the Victorian era. After passing away, people would often be posed in fixed positions to have their final portraits taken, serving as a way to keep the souls of the deceased lingering in the world.
How could these people be so superstitious?
Grief over the death of a loved one can lead people to do the strangest things.
Get rid of it. I don't want it in the house.
Yes, ma'am.
Today, we are diving into the classic suspense masterpiece, The Others. The story takes place in 1945, just as World War II has come to an end, within an old estate on the British island of Jersey. Accompanied by a shrill, bone-chilling scream, our protagonist Grace jolts awake from a nightmare. At the same time, three strangers are walking toward the mansion, chatting and laughing as they slowly approach before gently ringing the doorbell. Grace opens the door to see these three unfamiliar faces and asks what business they have there. Before the old woman can even respond, it suddenly dawns on Grace that she was originally looking to hire several servants for the manor, so these three must be here for the job, though she didn't expect them to arrive quite so soon. So, Grace stops her questioning and directly invites them inside. Mrs. Mills introduces Mr. Tuttle and Lydia to Grace. While Mrs. Mills is introducing Lydia, the girl keeps her head bowed and remains silent, appearing extremely restrained. Grace even assumes Lydia is a first-time servant and worries about her lack of experience. Facing this skepticism, Mrs. Mills immediately replies, telling her not to be fooled by Lydia's baby face because she's actually quite seasoned and knows how to do everything.
She can't talk, ma'am. The poor little mite's a mute.
Grace then assigns them their living quarters, placing Mrs. Mills and Lydia in the attic while Mr. Tuttle sleeps in the back storehouse. A strange event occurred in this old mansion just a week ago, where the previous servants all vanished under mysterious circumstances, as if they had evaporated into thin air, leaving without even taking their wages. Consequently, the manor hasn't been cleaned in a very long time. Grace specifically stated in her hiring notice that her standard for recruitment is honest and hard-working people. To this, Mrs. Mills tells her with great confidence that no one will be more industrious than the three of them. So Grace first takes them on a tour of the kitchen, explaining things like what time to cook, how to tidy up, and other daily chores. At this point, Mrs. Mills casually asks about the master of the house. This question stirs up Grace's sorrow as she turns and responds that her husband, Charles, went to the battlefield a year and a half ago and hasn't been heard from since the armistice. Upon hearing these words, Mrs. Mills and the others seem to realize something and cease their questioning. Next, Grace introduces them to the bizarre rules of working here. This old mansion has a total of 50 doors and 15 keys, and whenever they enter a room to work, they must close the previous door before they can open another, ensuring that two doors are never open at the same time. Having said that, they arrive at the music room, where the piano has been sitting since before Grace's family moved in. She tells them to keep a constant eye on it and absolutely never let the children play it randomly. Because Grace is extremely sensitive to sound, even the slightest noise will give her a splitting headache. To avoid these unnecessary sounds, there are no telephones, radios, or even electricity in this old manor. Since the Germans would frequently cut the power during the war, they have already grown accustomed to living without it. Just as Grace is preparing to lead them to the next room, Mrs. Mills can't help but speak up, reminding her that she doesn't actually need to show them every single room one by one. But Grace insists on doing so. She says solemnly that the house is usually pitch black, so they must be familiar enough with the layout to know exactly where every table and chair is located to avoid bumping into things while working. Hearing this, Mrs. Mills is puzzled, as the lighting in the manor seems decent enough and not nearly as exaggerated as Grace claims. Regarding this doubt, Grace doesn't respond directly, but instead says it's time for them to meet her children. She then leads them to the living room. As soon as she enters, she immediately orders Mrs. Mills and Lydia to pull all the curtains tight, not allowing a single sliver of light to leak in. She then lights a candle, and by its faint flickering glow, cautiously steps up the stairs, heading toward the children's room one step at a time. Along the way, she also warns Mrs. Mills and Lydia that no matter what happens, they must never pull open the curtains. After saying this, she softly wakes the two children and has them recite a prayer before leading them out. The sister is named Anne, and the younger brother is Nicholas. Grace explains that Anne and her brother are extremely sensitive to light, If they are exposed to it for even a few minutes, they will develop sores, have difficulty breathing, and it could even be fatal in severe cases. Because of this, the entire mansion is shrouded in darkness year-round. While Mrs. Mills is looking after them during breakfast, the two siblings get into a heated argument over whether their father, Charles, will ever return. Mrs. Mills originally intended to stop them, but unexpectedly, Anne turns her spear toward her, saying she probably won't stay long either, as everyone who comes here says they won't leave, but eventually does, and then something bad happens.
Mummy went...
Be quiet.
Did? No, it didn't! Yes, it did!
Quiet.
After Grace steps in to stop the children's bickering, she sternly calls Mrs. Mills outside. She has discovered something hair-raising. The postman usually comes to collect mail every Wednesday, but for some unknown reason, he didn't show up this week. Just a moment ago, she went out to check the mailbox and found that her recruitment letter was still sitting inside and had never been published. So how exactly did they find their way to her doorstep? Mrs. Mills seems to have anticipated that this would eventually come to light and remains very calm. She says that, in fact, they were just passing by to try their luck, since a grand estate like this would likely need experienced servants like themselves. She goes on to mention something that catches Grace off guard.
We in fact used to work here. Here. Oh no.
So they are very familiar with the structure of this old mansion, and unless the walls grew legs and moved themselves, they know it like the back of their hands. This isn't a bad thing for Grace, as the manor is currently in desperate need of staff, so she stops dwelling on it and just meaningfully tells Mrs. Mills that she hopes she can keep a clear head at all times, as the children sometimes talk nonsense and she shouldn't take it seriously. For a child is just a child after all. This warning seems directed at the remark Anne blurted out at the table earlier about Mom being crazy. Is Anne really the one talking nonsense, or is Grace deliberately hiding something? That night, Grace leads the children in reading stories of martyrs, covering how Roman rulers forced two believers to convert, but the believers chose death over submission and were ultimately executed. Hearing her brother read this, Anne can't help but burst into laughter. Seeing his sister laugh, the younger brother is also swept up in the amusement. Grace doesn't understand where the humor lies in this tragic and awe-inspiring story of martyrdom. But from Anne's perspective, these two believers were foolish because their demise was caused by their own stubborn faith. Anne feels that faith is a matter of the heart, so believing internally is enough without openly defying the Roman rulers and throwing one's life away for nothing. Hearing her daughter say this, Grace finds it somewhat unbelievable, so she turns to ask her son if he feels the same way. Nicholas also nods in agreement. Grace is utterly disappointed as she feels that if children use lies and the betrayal of Jesus to exchange for temporary survival, they will be punished after they are unalived and sent to limbo. This limbo is a region between heaven and hell where souls are detained, such as those who haven't let go of their obsessions, or souls that need purification due to their sins. It is even said that some souls sent here don't even realize they have already passed away. But here Grace uses limbo to scare the children, saying those who betray their faith will be sent there, never to be redeemed and doomed for eternity. As punishment, she requires the two children to thoroughly study an entire lesson before they can go out to play. And fearing that Anne will influence Nicholas, she even forces them to separate, making Anne stay in the music room alone. Because going to the music room requires passing through the living room, Grace goes out first to arrange for Mrs. Mills to pull all the curtains tight along the way before she sends Anne out. Compared to the quirky Anne, Grace is more worried about the timid and obedient Nicholas. She gently tells her son that if he is afraid of being alone here, he should grip his prayer beads tightly and recite a prayer once, and then his fear will vanish. Nicholas is very obedient to his mother, so even though he knows in his heart that this is useless, he still nods and agrees. After settling the children, Grace comes to the living room, and perhaps wanting to get to know Mrs. Mills more deeply, she asks her whether she has children. Mrs. Mills says no, stating that she only has Mr. Tuttle and Lydia, and that they have always depended on each other for survival. Then Grace asks if Lydia was born mute. Mrs. Mills firmly tells her that she wasn't, then finds an excuse to leave, fearing that Grace might continue to pry. But just as Mrs. Mills leaves, Grace hears the sound of a child crying coming from another room. Her first thought is her son, thinking that he might be scared being alone in the pitch-black house, so she rushes over immediately. Seeing that Nicholas is perfectly normal, she wonders if it was her daughter crying, and hurriedly rushes to the music room. Since there is no one in this house besides Nicholas and Anne, Grace assumes it must have been Anne crying if Nicholas wasn't. But perhaps Anne's strong self-esteem makes her unwilling to let Grace see her vulnerability. Seeing her mother so persistent, Anne says she indeed didn't cry, but there was a boy named Victor crying here just now. Upon hearing this, Grace immediately becomes angry, feeling that Anne is lying to her again. Anne also says the boy was crying because he doesn't like this house, but his father is a pianist who must live here, and she even just stopped the boy from touching the piano. Seeing Anne making up stories so seriously, Grace gets even more annoyed, closes the piano lid with a slam, and asks Anne if she saw the boy's father. Anne says she didn't, and that she only talked to Victor, but his family members are all in the living room. But Grace had been staying in the living room before coming here, and she didn't see anyone at all. Anne actually doesn't quite understand why her mother didn't run into Victor's family, thinking they might have gone to other rooms to explore. But by now, Grace has run out of patience to listen to Anne weave her tales.
How a boy can get in and out of this room if it's locked?
Seeing this, Grace immediately finds Mrs. Mills and Lydia and gives them a harsh scolding. When they first arrived, she had clearly stated that the first door must be closed before the other can be opened, yet they clearly aren't taking her words seriously. This is no small matter to Grace, because opening too many doors would let light in, which is a rule directly related to the safety of her children. She doesn't give Mrs. Mills a chance to defend herself and directly asks who the last person to enter the room was. Lydia quickly shakes her head. Moreover, since no one besides Grace has keys except for Mrs. Mills, the answer is self-evident. Yet at that time, she clearly saw with her own eyes Mrs. Mills heading outside.
Your own eyes.
I hope you are not suggesting that it was me. Do you think that I would overlook such a thing and endanger the life of my own daughter?
This statement leaves Mrs. Mills speechless, and she can only take the blame. That night, while the siblings are eating, the brother asks Anne nervously if she really saw the strange boy. Anne answers with certainty again that she did see him, and they don't look like ghosts, as ghosts wear white sheets and carry chains while only moving at night. In the middle of the night, Anne urgently shakes her brother awake and points toward the window. At this moment, the curtains are wide open, and she tells her brother that Victor opened them and has been tinkering there all night. But Nicholas is already used to being teased by Anne, so he no longer believes her words. Anne doesn't explain further and simply speaks toward the curtains, telling Victor to come out so her stupid brother can see him. After saying that, she gets up and walks toward the window, closing the curtains herself. But in the next second, a rumbling sound of footsteps suddenly erupts in the room, and the curtains are opened once again. Following that, Nicholas hears his sister muttering to herself, "That's enough, Victor." Nicholas thinks Anne is pretending to be a boy just to scare him, so he says if she scares him again, he will go find their mother. Seeing that her brother doesn't believe her, Anne doesn't bother explaining anymore, so she tells Victor to touch Nicholas's face. Just like that, Anne is punished again to go and recite the Bible. After finishing, Grace even forces her to apologize to the Virgin Mary. But Anne is unwilling to apologize for something she didn't do, as she clearly didn't scare her brother, and insists on what she saw with her own eyes. However, Grace is convinced that there cannot be anyone else in the house, and decides that her daughter is lying, scaring her by saying that children who lie will go to limbo. Anne, however, soberly retorts that what is written in the book is completely different from what her mother says, as limbo is for unbaptized children, and she has already been baptized. Unable to make her daughter bow her head and admit fault, Grace can only continue punishing her by making her read the Bible. 3 consecutive days pass, and even Mrs. Mills can't stand it anymore, asking Grace how much longer the punishment will last. Grace's meaning is that the duration depends on Anne herself, and it will stop whenever she learns to let go of her pride and admit her mistake. She stays right here with Anne, adding that she gradually feels a sense of being cut off from the world, especially since the mist outside refuses to dissipate. This indicates that Grace hasn't been out of the house for a long time. Just then, Lydia, who is cleaning upstairs, makes a series of heavy movements, causing Grace to be distracted and accidentally prick her hand with a needle. So she impatiently instructs Mrs. Mills not to let Lydia keep walking back and forth, as such noise will trigger her migraine. Hearing this, Mrs. Mills goes to talk to Lydia about the matter, but after a while the footsteps upstairs become even more intense, stopping and starting intermittently, making Grace feel incredibly agitated. In the next second, a dull thud suddenly falls from above. Grace has reached her limit and decides to go find Lydia herself to have a word with her. Could it be that, just as Anne said, there truly are other people in this old mansion? So she finds Anne to ask if she heard any strange noises just now, but Anne seems not to have heard anything. or perhaps she is still brooding as she continues reading the Bible. Just then, a heavy sigh suddenly comes from downstairs. Grace immediately goes on alert and sticks her head out to check, yet she doesn't find even a shadow. She can only ask Anne again who that voice belonged to. Anne has also been punished for 3 days and has a lot of pent-up anger, so she doesn't want to continue dwelling on this with her mother and says crossly that she already told her there are others in the room, but she didn't believe her and even punished her. So what does she want her to do now? But under Grace's constant questioning, Anne finally points to the storage room on the 2nd floor, meaning the person is in there and she can go find them herself. So Grace tiptoes to the storage room door and nervously pushes it open just a crack. The old items inside are all covered with white sheets, and after she enters and looks around, she doesn't see a single soul, but she can vaguely hear people whispering all around her. Grace immediately follows the sound and chases after it. Anne tells her that those people just passed through here, but Grace can't see anything and can only hear the sounds of conversations coming from all directions, along with the sounds of doors opening and closing. As for what specifically these people are talking about, Grace can't hear clearly and can only rely on Anne to relay it to her. Anne says these people claim the house is theirs and they are going to tear down all the curtains. To show her mother what those people look like, Anne draws them on paper, depicting a family of 3 and an old woman in strange clothing. She also marks numbers above the portraits, representing the number of times she has seen them. What makes Grace's skin crawl is that her daughter has already seen the old woman 14 times. Grace immediately gathers the servants, intending to thoroughly search the entire mansion before dark, making sure to find these 4 people. After Mrs. Mills leaves, Anne points to the portrait of the old woman and adds to her mother that this old woman seems to be able to see them, constantly saying, "Come with me, come with me." And Victor says this old woman is a witch who always asks strange questions. Now the situation has become very serious, so Grace digs out a long-forgotten shotgun and takes the 3 servants to pull open all the curtains, beginning a meticulously detailed search that doesn't overlook any corner. Meanwhile, Nicholas thinks the uninvited guests might be the original owners who were unwilling to leave after their passing and remained here as spirits. But Anne immediately dismisses this theory because, according to books, ghosts must wear white sheets and carry chains. At this point, Mrs. Mills speaks up, saying that what is written in books isn't necessarily always right. Grace once said that ghost stories are just trashy reading and told them to only believe in the Bible. But the 2 children don't entirely believe in the Bible either. They feel that God creating the world in 7 days is too far-fetched. Noah's Ark couldn't possibly hold all the animals. And they don't even believe the Holy Spirit is a dove, since doves always leave a mess on the windowsill. The children's innocence and stubbornness make Mrs. Mills laugh uncontrollably. Mrs. Mills then asks if they have ever mentioned these things to their mother. The 2 children shake their heads silently. They know their mother is a devout believer, and if she heard these skeptical words, she would definitely punish them by making them recite scriptures. At the same time, Grace finds some old photos covered in dust, which seem to be of the original owners of the manor. So she takes Anne's drawing to compare it carefully with the photos, and finds that they are not the same group of people. Then she unearths an old album, and upon opening it, she sees that the people in the photos all have their eyes closed and are lying peacefully, without exception. Grace originally thinks the people in the photos are just asleep. However, during that period, the trend was to pose the bodies of the deceased in specific positions to take commemorative portraits, with the hope that their souls would continue to exist in the world. Grace doesn't understand their practice and finds it both superstitious and terrifying. In the evening, while idle, Grace suddenly becomes interested in the fact that Mrs. Mills once worked here. Mrs. Mills tells her that at that time, there were about 15 servants in this mansion. But later, the master moved to London, eventually leaving only the 3 of them to watch over the estate. Grace can relate to this because before the German invasion in 1940, her family also left the island, but she doesn't blame them. Mrs. Mills says that the 3 of them were also forced to leave the island back then because tuberculosis broke out and many people passed away from it. Grace asks again if that was when Lydia became mute. Mrs. Mills says maybe, but she is getting older and her memory isn't very good, and she only knows that one day Lydia suddenly stopped speaking. Grace feels puzzled as she thinks Lydia must have suffered some kind of trauma, so she continues to press, asking if they encountered anything else. To prevent Grace from overthinking, Mrs. Mills says the original owner of this place was very good to them, and then goes to rest. Late at night, Grace walks lightly into the children's room. Although she is usually very strict with Anne and often punishes her, as a mother, she actually feels very guilty. She leans over and expresses her apologies to Anne. Anne is actually awake at this moment, but she doesn't know how to respond to her mother. Just as Grace turns to leave, her son suddenly asks a timid question.
When's Daddy coming home?
Her son's words make Grace feel deeply saddened. In fact, the war has already ended by now, but she doesn't know where Charles is or why he hasn't returned. At that moment, she suddenly hears the melodious sound of a piano coming from the attic. Could it be that the uninvited guests have returned? Grace immediately takes her shotgun upstairs to investigate. The piano music stops abruptly. When Grace first steps into the room, the door slowly closes automatically. Next, she sees that the piano lid is open, so she hurriedly closes it again and locks it. Then she patrols the house with her shotgun but finds nothing. Just as she is about to leave, the music room door closes automatically again, as if someone inside is helping her close it. Grace also senses something abnormal and tentatively pushes the door open, feeling that the invisible force inside seems to be resisting her and pushing the door outward. They push and pull back and forth, stalemating for a while. The person inside loses patience.
Mrs. Mills! The key to the music room! Give it to me!
When the music room door is opened again, the piano lid that Grace had just locked is thrown open once more. This time, Grace experiences the supernatural phenomenon firsthand, and she believes that some restless spirits are hidden in the manor. Mrs. Mills also agrees with her statement. But as for who these restless spirits actually are, Mrs. Mills doesn't say it directly, only cryptically mentioning that sometimes the world of the dead and the world of the living intersect. Grace feels this is impossible, since life and death follow separate paths, and God would never allow such a mess to happen, as it's impossible for the dead and the living to meet in the same world, or at least, that's what the Bible says. Mrs. Mills seems to have anticipated this reaction, and says with deep meaning that not everything has a logical explanation. Obviously, Grace doesn't understand Mrs. Mills' hidden meaning, and hurriedly rushes to find a priest to have him come and exorcise these restless spirits. While passing through the garden, she happens to run into Mr. Tuttle, who is sweeping dead leaves, and instructs him to look carefully for any tombstones in the garden. Because when Charles first bought this place, she heard there was a small graveyard, and these restless spirits might be bound to the tombstones, which is why they haunt the manor. But Mr. Tuttle states that he has never seen any tombstones. Grace says they might be covered by weeds, and tells him to search thoroughly to see if he can find a tombstone with Victor's name on it. After saying this, she departs. At this moment, Mrs. Mills walks over and they whisper to each other. Meanwhile, just as Mrs. Mills expected, Grace quickly loses her sense of direction after walking into the dense mist, circling around and failing to find a way out. Just as she is wandering aimlessly, heavy footsteps echo from not far away, and Charles actually emerges from the sea of fog. After reuniting with Charles, Grace no longer thinks about calling for a priest and joyfully brings her husband back home. However, when Mrs. Mills locks eyes with Charles, her shocked expression seems to indicate she has discovered something. Next, Charles walks into the children's room and gently embraces them, filled with the excitement of regaining what was lost, as if he wants to melt all his longing into this embrace. Until Anne asks him a certain question.
Daddy, did you get anyone?
Anne's words seem to make Charles think of something, his gaze gradually becoming solemn, and his entire demeanor changes. When Grace calls him down for dinner, Charles doesn't respond at all and directly closes the bedroom door. But Grace doesn't think much of it, assuming her husband might need some time to adjust after returning from the battlefield, so she doesn't disturb him. During dinner, Anne asks her mother where the souls of those who unalived in the war go. Grace says it depends on whether they fought for justice or evil, but children don't need to worry about this, as they won't be going to war. At this point, Nicholas says dejectedly, "We aren't going anywhere." But to Grace at this moment, that doesn't matter. As long as their family is reunited, it is the greatest happiness, even if they can't go anywhere.
And the intruders?
There are no intruders here.
But you said that there were.
No, I said that there are no intruders here, and I don't want to hear another word on the subject.
But you said...
No, that is enough!
Her mother's sudden change in attitude makes Anne feel very aggrieved. Seeing this, Mrs. Mills comes over to comfort Anne, saying she has seen the uninvited guests Anne mentioned. Then Anne asks her why she didn't help explain things to her mother if she had seen them. But Mrs. Mills says there are some things her mother can't listen to right now because she only believes what's in books. But she assures her that she will eventually see them, and then everything will change significantly. That same night, the three servants quietly gather together, appearing to be plotting some kind of plan. Mrs. Mills says it is troublesome that Grace is pretending as if nothing is wrong, but her daughter Anne is not as stubborn and is quite clear-headed. At this time, Mr. Tuttle asks Mrs. Mills if she thinks Charles became suspicious after their encounter today. Mrs. Mills shakes her head helplessly and says she feels he doesn't even know where he is. On the other side, Anne is trying on her communion dress, which she likes very much, so she begs her mother to let her wear it a bit longer, and then begins dancing gracefully while humming a little tune alone. Grace, meanwhile, goes to the bedroom to see if her husband has improved at all, as he hasn't eaten a single bite in a long time, and things can't go on like this. But Charles remains empty-eyed and numb, completely ignoring his wife. The person she has longed for day and night has finally returned, but turned into this state, filling Grace's heart with sorrow. After she composes herself, she prepares to go in and help Anne take off the communion dress, but upon pushing the door open, she sees Anne sitting on the floor, stubbornly insisting that the floor is clean and she won't get the dress dirty. However, as Grace draws closer, her pupils dilate suddenly. She sees that Anne's hands are covered in wrinkles, dry and aged, as she keeps fiddling with a puppet. This is no longer her daughter at all, but a very old woman. Grace's emotions spiral out of control as she frantically questions the old woman in front of her about where she has hidden her daughter. Eerily, after she tears off the white veil, Anne transforms back into her original self. And Grace's behavior seems to trigger some painful memory in Anne, who cries and screams while fleeing out the door, saying her mother is going to unalive her and is very wicked. Mrs. Mills can't calm Anne down either, so she sends Anne to be with Charles. Grace explains that she didn't hit her daughter and that she saw an old woman with strange eyes who was mimicking Anne's figure. Mrs. Mills comforts her, saying she needs a good rest and shouldn't worry about the manor anymore, leaving it to them as they know what to do. But this sentence infuriates Grace to the extreme. When Grace returns to the bedroom, the first thing Charles says is that Anne has told him everything. Grace thinks Anne has told her father about the manor being haunted and Victor's family, but Charles says she told him what happened that day. He doesn't explain exactly what happened on that day, just keeps repeating, "Tell me it isn't true." On the other side, Nicholas sees his sister crying and asks her what was wrong. Anne says Mom hit her and that she was crazy, just like that day. But Nicholas seems unable to remember clearly what happened that day, or perhaps he is intentionally trying to forget.
Not me. The children.
Charles finds that matter unacceptable, so he stands up and bids his wife farewell again, saying the war isn't over and he has to return to the front lines. At this moment, the strength Grace has been faking completely collapses. When the cruelty of war is reduced to its smallest unit, it is a single home. The outcome of the war is meaningless to her. Even if the war is finally won, if her husband isn't by her side, this home is a total failure. When Grace wakes up the next day, Charles has already left. Just as she falls into sorrow and bewilderment, Anne's scream suddenly erupts from the manor. When she rushes back, she discovers that the curtains that were originally tightly sealed have all been torn down, and piercing light floods into the house as her son and daughter hide in the shadows under the bed in a state of panic. Grace originally thinks about putting the curtains back, but looking closer, she sees only bare rods on the windows, with not a single piece of fabric left. She has no choice but to take off her outer coat to cover the two children and prepare to flee. At this moment, Mrs. Mills is standing there expressionlessly, silently watching everything, remaining unmoved no matter how Grace calls out to her. Fortunately, both children are safe and only frightened, now crying and demanding to find their father. The rift between Anne and Grace has not dissipated either, but her immediate priority is to find the curtains. Grace sees Lydia cleaning and rushes up to question her about who did this. Luckily, Mrs. Mills arrives in time to bail Lydia out. Now Grace shifts her target, asking Mrs. Mills who exactly removed the curtains. Mrs. Mills says she doesn't know. At this time, Mr. Tuttle happened to walk over and said indifferently that he didn't know and wondered how anyone could have removed the curtains. Mrs. Mills retorts to Grace, asking how she would know if the children were healed if she didn't let the light in.
I told you. I already told you the children are photosensitive. The light will kill them.
Yes, but that...
The way Mrs. Mills and Mr. Tuttle are backing each other up makes it seem like they are about to show their hand. but Grace has no time for a war of words. She likely understands their purpose now, which was to force their family of 3 out and take over the house. So she uses her shotgun to force Mrs. Mills to hand over the keys and then kicks them out. Grace searches every corner of the manor like a madwoman, looking from day until nightfall, but she finds nothing no matter how she searches. On the other side, Anne has not forgotten what her mother did to her and tells her brother that Mom is crazy. But Nicholas believes in his mother and feels his sister is talking nonsense. This time, Anne doesn't argue with her brother anymore. She climbs straight out of the window, intending to go to the woods to find their father alone. Since his sister was determined to go, and Nicholas didn't dare stay in the pitch-black room alone, he had no choice but to follow her. To give each other courage, the 2 children hold hands and talk as they walk through the woods, soon seeing 3 prominent tombstones. Nicholas is afraid a ghost will jump out and stays in place, letting Anne go check them out by herself. At the same time, Grace arrives at the servants' room in the attic, but pushing the door open, she doesn't find the missing curtains. Just as she was about to give up, she unintentionally sees a letter tucked under the mattress, with the date at the bottom being December 1891. When she flips the envelope over, her pupils shrink instantly. The content inside the envelope is a photo of the 3 servants, all lying peacefully with their eyes closed, exactly like the death portraits Mrs. Mills had mentioned to ensure souls continue to exist. It turned out that more than half a century ago, they had already unalived in this old mansion due to that tuberculosis outbreak. On the other side, Anne also sees the names carved on the tombstones, and her face is filled with terror. What was written there was, Tomb of Mrs. Mills, 1829 to 1891. At that moment, Anne looks back and sees the 3 servants approaching Nicholas step by step. But Nicholas doesn't know the content of the tombstones and even begs Mrs. Mills not to tell their mother about them sneaking out. Seeing this, Anne is almost driven mad with anger, screaming desperately for him not to talk to them because they are ghosts. Hearing this, Nicholas looks them over carefully and says to Anne that she had said ghosts wear white sheets and carry chains, so he thinks Anne is teasing him again. After getting the children safely back into the house, Grace points her shotgun at Mrs. Mills and the others, firing repeatedly. But since they are spirits, they can't be hit, and she hurriedly flees back into the manor. She tells the 2 children to hide in the bedroom first while she covers the rear. But it seems that Mrs. Mills and the others have no intention of harming them. Mrs. Mills says they have been trying to make her understand the new situation of this manor and want her to learn how to coexist peacefully as the dead and the living. This statement causes Grace to break down. 3 ghosts want to occupy her house and even demand peaceful coexistence, which is simply too much. But then Mrs. Mills' words become even stranger, saying that even if the 3 of them didn't make things difficult for her, would those uninvited guests let them go? She was referring to Victor's family and says they were the ones who removed the curtains, and that family is currently in the same room as her children and will soon come for her. Inside the bedroom, after Anne leads Nicholas to hide in the wardrobe, they hear bursts of footsteps outside. Hearing the children's screams from upstairs, Grace guesses they have encountered Victor's family. So, holding her prayer beads and reciting a prayer, she walks upstairs in a panic. Grace sees the 2 children cowering on the side, while a medium asks them what exactly happened here and what their mother has done to them. Then she sees Anne lean into her ear and whisper something for a while. The medium records it on paper while listening, then hands it to the old man with glasses next to her, who translates the content, saying it seems to involve a pillow. The truth finally surfaces. What Anne had told the medium was this: Mom went crazy that day, smothered my brother and me with a pillow, and then unalived herself with a gun. In reality, Victor's family and the medium were performing a seance. Because Mr. Marlish liked this manor very much, he wanted to find out the origin of these 3 spirits. But after witnessing that scene, Mrs. Marlish refuses to stay here no matter what, saying Victor has nightmares every day since coming here and can always see Anne's spirit, and even the medium they brought has been possessed by Anne. She feels these spirits are too aggressive and insists on moving out. Ultimately, Mr. Marlish was persuaded and promised his wife they would move the next morning. After everyone dispersed, Grace holds her 2 poor children and gradually remembers the process of unaliving them with her own hands and then turning the gun on herself. It was like falling into a deep sleep. When she woke up again, she had already become a spirit. It was just that Grace hadn't realized she was dead. Coincidentally, at that time, she heard the sound of children playing in the bedroom and thought God had given her a chance to live and be a good mother again. staying with her children here in peace. At this point, Mrs. Mills walks over and says that when they passed away, Lydia was the first to realize it, and the truth scared her into becoming mute. So, after they came here, they had been hinting to Grace that she no longer belonged to this world. If they told her directly that she was dead, they feared Grace wouldn't be able to handle the mental shock and would repeat Lydia's tragedy. After learning the whole truth, Grace finally lets go of her obsession and no longer clings to her faith. When Anne asks if they are in limbo, Grace calmly admits that she doesn't even know if limbo exists. She only knows she loves her 2 children very much. Early the next morning, Victor's family moved away, but it won't be long before new, uninvited guests move in. And that brings us to the end of the movie. This movie is told entirely from the perspective of spirits from beginning to end, wherein the ghosts believe themselves to be the living, while those uninvited guests who come to view the house are actually the ones perceived as ghosts from the spirit's point of view. So in the movie, whatever strange noises Grace hears, someone playing the piano or a door being opened mysteriously, are actually the normal movements of Victor's family coming to see the house and preparing to move in. Then there was the time Grace separated Anne and Nicholas to have them recite lessons and heard a child crying. This should have been Victor visiting the music room and happening to hear Anne reciting or seeing her, which scared him into tears. He then told his parents about this, leading them to bring a medium for a seance. Throughout the movie, Anne is the most clear-headed, not being trapped by her mother's stubborn religious obsession and vaguely remembering some events from when she was alive, like when she said Mom went crazy that day. That's why only Anne could see Victor's family. The setting of the movie seems to be that spirits must clearly realize they are dead before they can see the living. Nicholas is timid and obedient, relying on his mother and believing whatever she says, so he also couldn't accept the reality of being dead and, like Grace, couldn't see the ghosts, only vaguely hearing the sounds of the living. As for why Grace unalived her 2 children, part of it was the news of her husband dying in battle, which caused her mental world to collapse. Another possibility is that when the Germans occupied the island, she didn't want the children to fall into their hands and suffer, so she was forced to unalive them and her own life out of desperation. The movie is not just a horror film with a divine plot twist, but also realistically presents how a cruel war can completely shatter a normal family. Alright, thank you for watching another great movie with me, and I'll see you in the next episode.